Daily with me, Charlie Charlton, and we're with you until 1 o'clock. We're going to be discussing some rather sensitive issues at times. We want you to get in touch. The number to call is 0500 909 693. On text, it's 85058. We'll start with this. A campaign has been launched to give a voice to relatives who've been banned from visiting their loved ones in care homes. This has been started by Jenny Moore, who says that she was barred from seeing her mother-in-law in a Cornish care home for 3 years. She believes it was because she highlighted poor care. The home, run by Cornwall Care, says she was the only person they'd ever banned, and it was because of her behaviour. An investigation by the local government ombudsman finally saw the measure lifted. Jenny wants to take the power to ban visitors away from the care homes themselves. That's what we'd like your thoughts on if you have experience of this in this field. To discuss this, we also have Peter Heaton-Jones, who's an MP for North Devon, who says it's a growing problem, wants to create an independent organisation that can investigate complaints against care homes. And we have Nadra Ahmed as well, who's chair of the National Care Association, which represents care home providers across England. So good morning to Jenny, Peter and Nadra.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jenny, if we can start with you. Tell us what made you want to start this campaign.
I set up Your Voice Matters in 2010 when I found myself banned from a care home. And it was only when I set up Your Voice Matters I realised that the practice of banning of innocent families was happening all around the country. And over the last 6 years, it seems this is getting worse and worse. And following some parliamentary meetings this year, I decided to step it up and focus just on this one issue for the moment to try and close loopholes in the laws to protect innocent families.
And just to get the basics right here, when you say that the banning of innocent families, tell us more.
Well, providers are accusing families of bad behaviour, of habitual complaining, and basically you have no law to protect you. They can accuse you of anything. They don't have to provide any evidence. Identities of people who have made allegations about you are kept secret because they're protected under the Data Protection Act. So basically, anybody can be accused of something, found guilty, sentenced and punished, but they're not allowed to know what it is that they've done, and they have no way of defending themselves or a right to a fair hearing.
Now, many of us have relatives in care homes and have had over the years, and it's a melting pot of emotions, isn't it, Jenny? I mean, you've got the challenges of old age, you've got dementia care often in many cases, and then family demands. How intense can it get? How intense did it get for you?
It was very intense. I mean, it's ended up with quite some serious health problems for me over the years. And the thing is, families don't want to complain, and often it's the attitudes of the care providers when the families go to them that causes the situation to escalate. We're accused of wanting 100% perfect care homes. We realise you can't find a 100% perfect care home. All we want is our complaints to be heard and a bit of respect, really. And in my situation, for instance, and this is a common pattern with families, you may go to a healthcare assistant in a care home with a concern because you don't want to get them into trouble with their line management. The complaint isn't resolved. In my instance, I then went to the nurse in charge who reassured me they'd sort it out. They didn't. I had to repeat the complaint. It still didn't happen. I then had to go to the manager. It still wasn't put right. I then ended up at head office level, and it was then I became and labelled an habitual and vexatious complainant. My message is, sort out the problem when a relative first comes to see you, and then we have no reason to complain. It is, as you say, it's a really difficult journey for families. We shouldn't be victimised. We should be receiving support, not being labelled as troublemakers. And care providers need to be more sympathetic and more aware. The families need support as well, just like you get in a hospice in that module. It isn't just the patient that's looked after in a hospice. The whole family is supported. And yet in the world of care homes, proactive families who want to be involved in their loved one's care, They don't want us there because we see what goes on, we see their failings and we report it. So the easy way out is, let's ban you.
Let's bring in Nadra Ahmed on this, who is chair of the National Care Association. Can you shine a light on what you see from the care homes position, Nadra?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really unfortunate, the experience that we've just heard. But we have to kind of contextualise this into the vast majority of care services are very responsible about complaints. They do take them at the base that they are presented, and there is a huge amount of working through to make sure that the care of the individual and that's the primary concern, is the care of the individual is not compromised. And we do get, and I've been, my mother was in a care service, and there were things that weren't quite right. And I didn't feel resistance. I was reasonable about what I wanted, and I was able to articulate that and get it resolved. But there were other relatives in that care service as well who were quite damning about the service on a continued basis. And I could see that staff were quite frustrated by some of the quite damning comments that were being made about them, when they were doing their utmost to deliver excellent care at that time to about 25 people with high levels of dementia, and actually nursing people at the end of their lives. They were, and staff were taking abuse, and I was part of a task force that published with the Department of Health a guideline to violence against social care staff, and that was not just about physical violence, because of course they do. There is physical violence as well, but vast majority of times it is because of behavioural issues with relatives, and that's what staff do cope with. But this particular guide was also about, as you do in doctor surgeries everywhere, that abuse is not acceptable in that service. I think the way that this has been highlighted, there has been a communication issue, because of course it should be sorted out the very first port of call. And we represent responsible providers. We're very, very keen. It's a tripartite solution. When somebody goes into a care service, the family don't absorb themselves of all responsibility, no more than the NHS does when it's an NHS need. So I think we have to think about this, and instead of kind of really creating a campaign that is very damning of the whole of the care sector, I think we need to think very carefully about the solutions that we need to make, because this care sector is very fragile at the moment.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something you said there. If this is about communication, and it's important that we all listen to different sides here, there was a word you used which was reasonable, Nadra.
Yes.
Do you think some families have unreasonable expectations of the care that can be provided?
I think some families are actually, with the very best will in the world, wanting that one-to-one attention in a care service, which is quite hard when you've got other people in that service, and sometimes it can be quite difficult to deliver what a family wants. But then I think there are ample opportunities for a responsible care provider, their staff, the family, and the commissioners who actually place them, to actually sit down and have a conversation. There are reviews that are supposed to be undertaken by the commissioning authority that looks at the care plan, and then the care plan needs to be delivered. Now, if that care plan isn't being delivered and the family is complaining and they're not being listened to, then I think there is an issue for the responsible providers to be looking at methods of finding it. But I think by the same score, I would say that families need to just take a step back sometimes and think to themselves, am I being reasonable here? And I'm sure in this case, that did happen, and I'm sure that all the steps were taken.
Emotions are obviously running high in situations like this. Let's bring in Peter Heaton-Jones, who is MP for North Devon, just to give a bit of context to this, because we've heard from effectively both sides of the argument there, somebody representing families of people who are in care homes and people who are working within those care homes and organising them. Is this something that you have seen become a repeated problem, that communication's broken down, relationships have been wrecked between the two?
Yes, and I think it's very interesting, Charlie, the language that you used when you said we'd heard in effect from both sides, and that is the problem. It shouldn't be different sides. Everyone should be pulling together here. And I will just reflect on something that Nadra said. I wrote it down as she said it. She talked about this as being a campaign that's damning of the sector. No, it's not. That's not true, and I think Nadra needs to reflect on that language, because this isn't about the sector, this isn't about the care homes, this is about the elderly and vulnerable people who are in the care homes, and the relatives like Jenny sitting alongside me here, who are doing their best in a very reasonable way to raise concerns where there are concerns, and are finding that just for complaining they are being banned from seeing their relatives. Now, that isn't good enough.
But they are
Let's be clear.
claims, just to interrupt there, Peter, they are claims that the families themselves make. They feel they've been blacklisted. They feel then that they've been banned because they raised a problem, whereas in some of the instances we've spoken to, the care homes have denied that was the case at all. It's not that you raised an issue.
Let's be clear about this. There are the vast majority of care homes, and the staff who work in them do a very good job, and they are properly caring for the people that they should be caring for. Let's get that out there, because that is the case. However, even the small minority of cases where something goes wrong is too many. And the problem is, I got involved in this entire process more than 3 years ago, before I was even elected as the Member of Parliament, when a constituent of mine in North Devon, John Barras, came to me. He had had a similar situation that we've just heard from Jenny. His mother sadly died in a care home 6 years ago. He felt that his complaints and his concerns were not taken seriously, and he has written what I think is a very good policy document, in effect, called Care Means Care, calling for justice in the way that care homes are regulated and investigated. I've had some very positive meetings with the Care Minister in the government and with the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, which is the body responsible. The problem is, at the moment, the entire system is a web of complexity. It is very difficult for me as a Member of Parliament, let alone for relatives who are often in a highly emotional state, to navigate their way through the process of making a complaint if they feel something has gone wrong. And for the sake of the vulnerable and elderly people in those care homes, we've got to sort this out.
Thank you very much. That's Peter Heaton-Jones MP for North Devon. We'll return to this, but it's interesting because we've mentioned that there are two sides there. That's the words which, I did use. We've explored two people's stories. How many are waiting to be heard? Well, Christopher's called us. The number 0500 909 693. Christopher, you thought you were alone in this until you've heard these stories.
Oh, hello. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I'm amazed. I listen every day, but today I really pricked my ears up when I heard this. My situation briefly is that I looked after my mother-in-law for many years with my wife, and it became too much. She couldn't do a single thing for herself, so we reluctantly got her into a care home, and I didn't really notice for a while how slapdash it was, and then I found out each week a little bit more, things like 45 minutes response time to the emergency button, by which time she'd often soiled herself, and very embarrassing for her. The record was over an hour for not responding. They were coming along sometimes and resetting it and saying, look, we're busy at the moment, but we will be back, and resetting it and not coming back. Then she told me she'd not had a bath for 3 months. And there was a whole catalogue of things. So in the end, I reported them to the Care Quality Commission, who found that there was room for improvement in 5 areas. So I was pretty much right in what I was thinking. I thought it had got better. Cut a long story short, the same happened about a year later, and I decided this just isn't getting any better, and I reported them again. The next thing I know, I've been banned on all manner of spurious and false allegations, and I'm banned from the home. And the next time I will see her, at the moment, if nothing changes, is when I bury her. I've complained to social services, and they have said that this is a private care home. It's like a pub. You don't have to have anybody you don't want in your place. I've tried to move her, and they've resisted that. They won't even let me move her to another home. It's a terrible situation, and I feel that I've been completely wronged by just reporting what I saw as genuine bad practice.
Christopher, thank you very much for calling us. You're listening to BBC 5 Live Daily. We're talking about care homes. And on this issue of making complaints, I'd like to return to Nadra there. Once again, we're hearing families feeling that their names have been put on a blacklist just for speaking out. How do you stop that?
Well, I think that's horrendous. Who stopped him from moving his mother-in-law? Because I think, you know, this is the care home can't do that. The commissioner can do that, social services, who actually placed the individual, but the care home can't stop you moving anybody. It's not within their legal powers. People come to the services because they're placed there or of their own free will.
Does that just illustrate the problem? I mean, to use Peter's words before, the entire system is a web of complexity. I mean, we've heard the Care Quality Commission's been mentioned already. They're looking to make this clearer to care homes and relatives, that people should be able to raise concerns about bad care without fear of retribution. But they're not the ones to go to, are they?
Well, I absolutely agree with that, because I think, I know that every home has to have a complaints policy, and that should be very clearly displayed as to what that complaints policy is. I think when it comes to the banning of individuals, I mean, I find that quite a strange thing to happen in a care service where you are looking after somebody. The only time that I've come across this, and it has happened in the past, is where the individual has asked that people don't visit because £10 went out my purse, or, you know, every time they come I get really upset, and, you know, my two sons are rowing with each other, and I don't want to. So there are, but that is very clearly documented, and that's always passed through the social services. That's about the responsible provision. When it's done in any other way, then I find that quite strange, and I would be very, very careful not to comment, because I don't know individual cases.
Well, I spoke to somebody earlier who insists he was banned, and he says there's some very interesting bits of emotion which came out of the conversation, actually. Very complex story, but he says what has been left with is there's something of a no smoke without fire, and he felt that his credibility had been damaged in this entire situation, a sense of powerlessness.
And I guess that's the same with the care provider, because when this sort of thing happens, and when we see all the kind of very negative publicity and the images about care services, there is that assumption, that's a perception, that's the way the media kind of project it, that's public perception, is that there's no smoke without fire. I think it is really very, very sad, because it is a highly emotional time. I lived through this with my mum, and I know how difficult that situation is, because you are emotional, and I wanted them, you know, I did, especially towards the end of my mum's life, when she was a shell of the person that I knew and she couldn't respond. I did want the care staff to come as soon as mum as soon as I thought mum needed it. I was the one that was going in and saying, that water looks as though it's a bit old, but I knew what I could do about it as well, because I would go and get fresh, clean
having
water.
that power and knowledge.
And the confidence.
Can I bring in,
Charlie.
we've got somebody else on the line who I'd like to bring in, and Peter will, Peter, I mean, would you like to respond to that?
Well, yes, I think it's just important to say that, of course, Nadra and many relatives find themselves able to make complaints and find the care home is receptive. But there are many relatives, like Jenny, like your caller who you heard from, who don't find themselves in that position and who are banned purely because they make quite reasonable complaints. And we can't talk about the majority of cases where things seem to be okay. We've got to concentrate on the cases where things are going wrong and where elderly and vulnerable people are in care homes and their loved ones feel they have no power to do anything about it, or that the system is so complex that they don't know the first place to turn. We need simplicity and we need clarity in what relatives can do. Well, I heard the word commissioners said. Often a resident isn't put in a care home by a commissioned organisation, so you can't go to the commissioner.
But they still have a responsibility. Sorry, Peter.
The commissioner's contracts do. I'm not going to go on to the issue of evictions, but commissioners' contracts do nothing to protect a resident from being evicted. There's a 28-day notice rule, and if the care homes have what they consider a troublesome family, you are either threatened with being banned, you are banned, or you are told we cannot meet your loved one's needs any longer. Now, there's a couple of things I've been dying to say, really. This isn't a damning campaign, and I would like to point out I have a friend who runs a care home. We have a lot of care staff and care home managers who support our campaign, and they want us to get rid of the bad apples who are ruining the reputation of the good care homes. So this is not a damning campaign, and it takes a lot of courage for me to start this campaign, because I'm up against a powerful system. I'm labelled as a troublemaker.
Jenny Moore, can we come to what you want in a minute, because there is somebody who called us. It's Robin, and I'd love to hear what Robin has to say on this. You're through to BBC 5 Live Daily, Robin.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit more about your story.
Well, it's not my personal story particularly, although my mum required a degree of care towards the end of her life, but it was at home. But that's a different issue. I'm a professional. I'm a medic, and I have worked in the NHS. I've had a responsibility for relationships between the NHS and the care sector. I've worked in supervisory capacities in the care sector, and I also have experience as a trustee and various other responsibilities in the palliative care sector, the end of life care sector. And I was a clinical lead for end of life care for some years in the East Midlands. So my comment was that your guys have been talking about all sorts of different things, and they mentioned the word emotion on a number of occasions. And I think one of the emotions that becomes a driver for some of the difficulties between families and care homes and the NHS and everybody else is guilt. And I'm not making any judgmental statements when I say this, but most of us, ideally, would like to be able to take responsibility for our loved ones ourselves, but are not able to do so on many occasions. So, for example, you will hear a funny phrase used occasionally. It's used as a sort of badge by carers: distant relative syndrome. Patients or older people in care homes whose family live 100 miles away. An old lady living in a care home in Brighton whose family live in Bristol or Oxford or somewhere else. They cannot keep the type of overview, the relationship they wish with their loved one on the type of basis they would like, and they sometimes become over expectant as a consequence. They become over involved, and when they come to see their relative, they're almost looking for faults. Now, as I say, I'm not being judgmental about this.
No, Robin, I think that you've explained it very well, that there's this feeling of guilt. It's perhaps something that you've got personal experience of there, and it seems to feed into something we talked about earlier, which was about having, Nadra used the phrase, reasonable expectations of the families. But in the midst of that, just to return to Jenny Moore, who, this is where we started with, this campaign to give voice to relatives. Even if we have so many complex emotions involved in this situation, Jenny, you still need to know who to speak to express those emotions to, and then hopefully have the situation resolved for all concerned. What would you ideally like to see if in a year's time, paint the picture, what would you like the system to be, Jenny Moore?
Well, as far as I'm concerned at the moment, the whole of the sector, it's everything's, I call it cover-up care homes, really. I want an open and transparent, honest, supportive, compassionate environments. I want care, in a nutshell, I want care homes to be happy and safe places to live, to visit and to work.
And if the majority are, what about the cases where there are problems and concerns from relatives about care? What would you specifically like to see happen then?
Well, we need an independent body for dealing with complaints. We need families who are threatened with being banned to have a right to a fair hearing by an independent panel. There's too much power in the hands of the care homes. and that is it. The local authorities. I could talk all day about examples of local authorities that are protecting providers. 2 years ago, the regulator stated they turned a blind eye because they were scared of being sued. We've got care staff who are too scared to speak out because they'll think they're going to lose their job and being bullied. We've got doctors, and I can evidence this, are visiting care homes. They're not even looking to see if the home is failing.
All sides of the party who are involved here. So just finally to return to Nadra Ahmed on that, if what Jenny says is true there, would you be in support of there being an independent body which takes away the responsibility in some way, the onus being on you?
We have an independent body that every care home has to register with, and that's the Care Quality Commission. We also have Action on Elder Abuse, which deals with that. National Care Association works with them. We also partner with the Residents and Relatives Association, who work with these complaints. We get complaints in our office from family members who tell us about care homes where something is not quite right. We actually do either help and deal with them, or we actually pass them through to one of our partner organisations, like Residents and Relatives Association. And I think, when Jenny has just said it again, it's all the care sector, it's all, hidden. We have to, on the one hand, you're saying to me this is not about all the care homes, and that's been articulated through this debate. On the other hand, you're saying it's all the care homes. There are hundreds and thousands of care providers making excellent care decisions in the interest of the people they care for. There are fabulous families. We know of families where there have been complaints, and I could actually, witness tell you about 2 or 3 of them where one of the siblings has said,
it's undoubtedly a very difficult situation with emotions running high. I think the Care Quality Commission's been mentioned again there. What they have said is, as the regulator, we're looking at developing some information in order to make it really clear what people have a right to expect and can do if they feel their concerns are not being responded to in the right way. Thank you very much for expressing what is a difficult opinion at times, I think, after years of emotion being piled into this. We have Jenny Moore, Peter Heaton-Jones, who's an MP for North Devon, Nadra Ahmed, Chair of the National Care Association. You've heard from Christopher, you've heard from Robin, you've heard from Jenny, their personal stories. And this isn't the only sector, of course. We've heard complaints being made about and how they dealt with. The school sector is another one. If you have any concerns, what do you think is the right way of making them? How should you escalate them? Join us, 0500 909 693 on the phone.